Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take your curiosity, grab a stack of sources, and really try to boil it down to the core insights you're looking for. Fast.
Yep, getting straight to the heart of it.
Exactly. And today, we're diving into something called the value of values. We're drawing mainly from the Bhagavad Gita.
Specifically chapter 13, verses 7 to 11.
Right, those specific verses. And we're looking at them through the lens of Swami Dayananda's lectures. He has some really insightful talks on this and also on related healthy attitudes and values.
His work really illuminates these concepts.
So our mission, our goal here is pretty straightforward. We want to give you, the learner, a clear understanding of these essential principles.
And how they apply, right, both for, let's say, spiritual growth.
And just for everyday life, really, without getting, overwhelmed by all the complexity.
Absolutely. Because this ancient wisdom, the Gita and Swamiji's insights, they offer some very practical guidance.
Practical how? Like for managing our thoughts and feelings?
Yeah, for navigating that inner world and also how we, interact with other people. It's quite relevant.
Okay, so where do we start? Swamiji often talks about this feeling, this common human feeling.
That feeling of lack, like something's missing.
Yes, exactly. That sense of incompleteness and how we then search for happiness in, well, external things.
Right. Wealth, power, recognition, you name it. We think those things will finally make us feel whole, feel happy.
But Swamiji, he makes this really interesting point, doesn't he? He suggests that feeling of lack, it might be wrong.
He calls it a false notion, basically. The idea is that our true nature, fundamentally, is already complete. It's already happiness.
So we're looking outside for something that's already inside.
Pretty much. And it makes you think, why do we crave those external achievements so much?
Like the promotion or the bigger house.
Yeah, or even just getting validation online. Whatever it is, the desire underneath is always, or almost always, the desire for happiness.
We operate on this assumption that that thing will finally deliver the feeling we want.
And Swamiji actually calls this an illegitimate desire. Well, specifically if we believe the happiness is in the external thing itself.
Illegitimate because it's based on a false premise.
Yeah.
Like looking for your keys everywhere when they're in your pocket.
That's a perfect analogy. We have this inherent sense, maybe deep down, that happiness is ours. It's our nature.
Our birthright.
Yeah, right. But we keep looking outwards. And the real kicker is, even when we get that thing we wanted,
the satisfaction fades pretty quick, doesn't it?
It does. It's often short-lived. The mind, it just latches on to the next thing it desires.
Ah, the classic cycle. Reach the goal, enjoy it for a second, then what's next?
Exactly. It's kind of an endless pursuit if you stay on that track.
So if external achievements don't bring lasting satisfaction, where does it actually come from, according to this Vedantic view Swamiji explains?
Well, the core idea is that, true, lasting happiness isn't something you get from outside. It's already who you are.
Okay.
And you discover it or uncover it through self-knowledge, through understanding your true self.
Understanding the self. But turning inward like that, it's not always smooth sailing, is it? There's internal stuff that gets in the way.
Definitely. Swamiji uses a powerful metaphor from the Mahabharata to illustrate this internal struggle.
You mean the battle?
Yeah, the symbolic battle between the Pandavas and the Kauravas. He explains they aren't just characters in an epic story.
They represent something within us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They represent these opposing tendencies we all have, the, let's call them divine or constructive tendencies, and the more demonic or destructive ones.
So it's not really good guys versus bad guys out there, but more about the choices we make based on these internal pulls.
Precisely. He gives that really relatable example. Remember the airport customs one?
Oh, yeah, where you have something you maybe should declare.
Right, and you feel that inner conflict. Be honest, follow the rule, or try to save a bit of money, bend the rules slightly.
That happens all the time in small ways.
It does. We know the value of honesty in that case, but then this other impulse, maybe greed or just convenience, pops up and tempts us to compromise.
And Swamiji points out, we often make these little compromises, right? Maybe exaggerating something on a resume or...
Or telling small white lies, yeah.
Yeah.
It seems minor, but it points to this ongoing internal negotiation.
Okay, so how does this connect to just enjoying life?
Yeah.
Swamiji argues that cultivating values like, he mentions non-pretentiousness, nonviolence, honesty isn't just for, monks or saints.
Not at all. He says it's actually crucial for enjoying our day-to-day lives.
How so?
Well, think about it. To enjoy anything good food, a nice view, time with friends, you need two things. You need the means of enjoyment, sure.
The food, the view, the friends.
Right. But you also need the capacity to enjoy. And that capacity comes from having a certain state of mind.
Like a calm, peaceful mind.
Exactly, a tranquil mind. If your mind is constantly churning with restlessness, anxiety, fear, then even if you're surrounded by wonderful things, you can't really appreciate them fully.
Makes sense. You're too caught up in the internal noise.
Precisely. And values, living according to values like honesty, nonviolence, contentment, they contribute directly to that inner tranquility. They counteract the restlessness and fear.
So living by values helps create the mental space needed to actually enjoy life.
Yes. And there's another layer too, especially in the context of the Gita. These values are seen as essential for purifying the mind.
Purifying. What does that mean here?
It means reducing those disturbances, the anger, the greed, the jealousy we mentioned. A purified mind is clearer, more stable.
And that kind of mind is necessary to really understand the deeper teachings, like scripture or self-knowledge.
Exactly. It prepares the ground, so to speak, for self-knowledge to take root. You need that clarity to grasp the subtle truths.
Okay, so what's the basis of these values then? Things like nonviolence, truthfulness, where do they come from?
Well, Swamiji points out that these core values are pretty universal. You find them across different religions and ethical systems. They seem fundamental.
Right. Most cultures value honesty and not hurting others.
Exactly. And the things that prevent us from living by them, he calls impurities of the mind.
Those are the negative impulses we talked about.
Yeah. Anger, greed, jealousy, hatred, strong attachment, strong aversions. All those things that disturb our inner peace.
So they cloud the mind, basically.
They do. They prevent the mind from experiencing that tranquility needed for self-knowledge.
Yeah.
And interestingly, in the specific verses we're focusing on,
Chapter 13, verses 7 to 11.
right, Lord Krishna actually lists 20 specific values. And the purpose is explicitly stated to help purify the mind, to facilitate this process.
20 values. That's quite a list. Now, there's something that seems a bit contradictory here that Swamiji talks about.
What's that?
Well, we intrinsically like values, right? Nobody enjoys being lied to or hurt. We appreciate honesty and kindness in others.
True. We generally prefer a world based on those principles.
Yet, we often act against those very values ourselves. We lie, we get angry, we might be greedy. Why the disconnect?
Yeah. That goes back to those innate tendencies the Gita mentions. The idea of having both divine tendencies, or sampati.
The inclinations towards goodness, towards values.
Right. And also demonic tendencies, asuri sampati. Those less constructive impulses, the anger, the greed, etc., they exist side by side within us.
So it's an internal tug of war.
Pretty much. And then there's this other important distinction Swamiji makes between values that feel natural and those we sort of acquire.
Natural versus acquired values. Tell me more.
Natural values are things like truthfulness, nonviolence. They align with our deeper true self. Acquired values are things like the value we place on money, power, fame.
Things society teaches us are important.
Exactly. Things we learn from our environment. And think about how easily the value for money gets reinforced.
Oh, yeah. Early on, you get candy or a toy for money. The reward is obvious.
Right, it's tangible, immediate, so that value gets assimilated very easily. But the perceived gain from, say, always telling the truth.
It's often less clear, less immediate. Sometimes telling the truth might even seem disadvantageous in the short term.
Precisely. So in those moments of internal conflict, the acquired value, like getting ahead, even if it means being a bit dishonest, might seem more compelling. It can win against the natural value.
Even though deep down we prefer truthfulness.
Even so. And Swamiji keeps coming back to this point. Whatever you're pursuing externally, you need your mind to be present to actually enjoy it.
And those negative impulses, the anger, the jealousy, they pull the mind away.
They cloud it, distract it, make it restless, so you can't really enjoy whatever you've gained anyway. It undermines the whole purpose.
Okay. This leads us nicely to the first value Krishna mentions in that list of 20. Humility, right? A manitva.
Yes, a manitva. And Swamiji's interpretation is quite specific. It means not demanding respect from others.
Not demanding it. Interesting. Not just being humble in general, but specifically not expecting or requiring others to respect you.
Exactly. And why would someone demand respect?
Maybe because they feel they don't have enough. Or they feel insecure inside.
That's precisely Swamiji's point. Demanding respect often comes from a place of inner lack, a feeling of not being content or happy with oneself as one is. There's a need for external validation.
He uses that analogy of the flower.
Oh, the flower in the forest, yes. It blooms, it offers its beauty, its fragrance.
But it doesn't need anyone to notice or applaud it. It just is.
Right. It doesn't seek attention or validation. Whereas someone who constantly needs others to acknowledge their importance or intelligence.
It suggests they're relying on that external feedback to feel okay. Even, as Swamiji points out, intellectual types can have this ego need, wanting to be seen as smart.
Absolutely. Ego takes many forms. And the key insight here about any value, really, is that it only truly becomes a value for you when you personally understand its worth.
When you see the benefit yourself.
Yes. When you understand the inner peace, the clarity that comes from following it, and you also understand the loss, the inner conflict, the agitation that comes from violating it, that personal conviction makes it powerful.
Okay, let's talk about another huge one, nonviolence, ahimsa.
Mm-hmm.
We often think of it as just not hitting people.
Right, physical harm.
Oh.
But Swamiji expands it much, much further.
How so?
He stresses that it fundamentally requires actively checking those violent impulses within us. Anger, greed, harmful intent. We need to be aware of them and manage them.
So it's an ongoing internal practice.
Very much so. And the idea is that consistently practicing these values, like nonviolence, gradually weakens those negative tendencies. They lose their power over time.
And eventually they might even be eliminated, leading to that inner peace we talked about.
That's the goal, yes. Deep inner peace. And it's not just about physical actions. Ahimsa extends to our speech.
How we talk to people.
Yes. It means speaking truthfully, but also pleasantly, and only saying what's necessary. Avoiding harsh words, gossip, anything intended to hurt.
Truthful, pleasant, and necessary. That's a high bar.
It is, and it goes even deeper, to the level of thought.
Nonviolence in thought. How does that work?
It means avoiding hurtful intentions, not dwelling on anger or resentment, not wishing harm on others, even mentally. Swamiji identifies these 3 levels of potentially hurting others: body, speech, and mind.
Wow. That's incredibly comprehensive. Much more than just don't physically hurt anyone.
Absolutely. And he also mentions how values are interconnected. Practicing nonviolence often brings other values along with it.
Like how?
Well, if you're committed to not causing harm, you'll likely be more truthful, more compassionate, less greedy. It has a ripple effect. It's seen as a very fundamental value.
Isn't it the first yama in the Yoga Sutras?
It is indeed. Ahimsa is listed first, highlighting its foundational importance in yoga ethics. And Swamiji brings it back to that intrinsic desire we all have.
We don't want others to harm us.
Exactly. We don't want to be cheated, lied to, insulted, or physically harmed. So extending that same consideration to others is the essence of ahimsa.
It's like the golden rule, essentially.
Very similar, yes. But he does draw an interesting distinction between human understanding and, say, animal behavior.
Like a predator.
Yeah. A cat catching a mouse, for instance. The cat doesn't feel guilt because it's operating from instinct without the same level of conscious awareness of the mouse's desire to live or the concept of rights.
But humans, we do have that capacity for empathy, for understanding the impact of our actions.
We do. And that's why we feel guilt or remorse when we violate these core values. It signals we've acted against our own deeper understanding.
And nonviolence isn't just about not doing harm, right? There's a positive side.
Yes, definitely. The positive aspect is actively being kind, compassionate, helpful. It's not just passive avoidance of harm, but an active expression of care.
That makes sense. He even touches on how this relates to diet, doesn't he? Vegetarianism.
He does. The reasoning is that while complete nonviolence is impossible, we have to consume something to live. Choosing plants over animals is considered less violent.
Why is that?
Because plants are seen as having a lower level of evolution, a less developed consciousness or sentience compared to animals. Therefore, the impact, the violence involved in taking their life is considered lesser.
So it's about minimizing harm, given that some harm is unavoidable for survival?
That's the perspective, yes. Minimizing himself.
Okay, so those are some core values.
Yeah.
What about the related healthy attitudes Swamiji discusses? How do they fit in?
They're also really crucial for inner peace and preparing the mind for self-knowledge. One major one is vairagya, often translated as dispassion.
Dispassion. That sounds a bit cold.
It can sound that way, but it's more about freedom from being controlled by our intense attachments and aversions, our likes and dislikes.
Okay, so not indifference, but not being yanked around by desire and fear.
Exactly. Attachments arise when we see something external, a person, an object, a status as a source of our happiness or security. Aversions are the flip side, strong dislike or fear.
And these keep the mind focused outwards.
Yes, constantly seeking the pleasant and avoiding the unpleasant. This external focus prevents us from turning inward. Vairagya is an invitation to really question. Do these external things truly provide lasting happiness or security?
That's a big question. What other attitudes does he mention?
Self-acceptance is another vital one, really accepting ourselves as we are, flaws and all.
Why is that so important before trying to improve?
Because often that frantic drive for external achievement or validation stems from not accepting ourselves. We're trying to compensate for an inner feeling of inadequacy.
Ah, okay. And that drive for ego gratification, as he calls it.
It's endless. He compares it to feeding a fire. The more fuel you give it, the bigger it gets. It's never satisfied.
So self-acceptance helps break that cycle.
It's a crucial step. He also talks about just drawing boundaries, having a sense of proportion in everything.
Like moderation.
Yes, moderation in eating, in activity, even in speech, remembering that guideline. Truthful, pleasant, and necessary, finding balance.
That seems like a recurring theme, balance in inner harmony.
It really is. And then there's samachatatvam, which is equanimity.
Equanimity, treating things evenly.
Yes, treating pairs of opposites like success and failure, honor and dishonor, friend and enemy with a sense of balance. Not getting overly elated by the good or devastated by the bad.
How does one achieve that? It sounds difficult.
It comes from recognizing that these external events or labels don't define our true worth or affect our essential nature. It's tied to seeing the underlying oneness beneath the superficial differences.
Okay, so bringing all this together, the values, the attitudes, how do they pave the path towards self-knowledge?
Well, the fundamental requirement for gaining self-knowledge is to tune the mind inward. We're usually looking outward for happiness, right?
And for the next thing, the external fix.
But the Vedantic view is that the source of happiness is within, so we need to shift our focus. All these values and attitudes help quiet the mind, reduce the outward pull of desires and fears, and create the inner stillness needed for introspection.
Like clearing the stage so you can see what's really there.
Exactly. Swamiji uses that analogy of an actor wearing different costumes.
The king and the beggar one.
Yes, the actor might play a king in one scene and a beggar in the next, wearing different costumes, speaking different lines.
But the actor himself remains unchanged by the role.
Precisely. The actor's real identity isn't affected by the costume. Similarly, our true self, called Isvara or Atma, is unaffected by the costumes of life, success, failure, praise, blame, good times, bad times. These are just roles or experiences.
So the goal is to recognize the actor, the one wearing the costume, rather than getting lost in the role itself.
That's the essence of it, to see beyond the temporary roles and identify with that unchanging awareness within.
And this requires effort.
Swamiji emphasizes steadfastness, making the pursuit of self-knowledge a top priority. He talks about different stages, maybe starting with karma yoga, acting selflessly in the world while seeking knowledge and potentially moving towards more focused contemplation, like sannyasa.
It's a journey, a process.
Yes, and the core process involves shravana, listening to the teachings from a qualified guide, manana, reflecting deeply on them, questioning, understanding, and nididhyasana, internalizing the knowledge, making it one's own lived reality.
Listening, reflecting, internalizing.
Right. And through this, realizing that happiness is fundamentally a function of your state of mind, not dependent on external events. Those events are just incidental triggers, really.
The self is discovered in that clear, calm mind.
In a mind free from the pull of attachments and anxieties, a pure, clear mind. And Swamiji sums it up powerfully. Living according to these values is knowledge. Giving in to the negative impulses, the anger, the greed that is ignorance.
And one leads to happiness, the other to misery.
Ultimately, yes, that's the implication.
Okay, this naturally leads to the question, what is this self, this true nature? Lord Krishna says he will explain what is to be known.
Yes, he promises to clearly explain the ultimate reality, the truth, and various names are used for it.
You mentioned Brahma, Atma, Isvara.
Right. Truth, knowledge, infinite. These are all pointers to the same single underlying principle. Swamiji clarifies that Isvara can be understood as the self manifesting as everything, as all beings.
Like the gold manifesting as different ornaments. The gold is the reality. The ornaments are just forms.
That's a classic analogy, yes.
Wow.
The underlying reality of Brahman is one appearing as many. And the crucial point is we are already experiencing this reality. It's the very basis of our existence and awareness. We just don't recognize it.
Because we're focused on the forms, the ornaments, not the gold itself.
Exactly. And the words used to describe Brahman infinite, consciousness, bliss, they're indicative. They point towards it, but they can't fully define it because it's beyond concepts and language.
Now, that's where the neti-neti comes in. Neither this nor that.
Precisely. You can't pin it down with words.
No.
but you can infer its presence. Swamiji uses the analogy of electricity.
How so?
You don't see electricity directly, but you see the bulb glowing, the fan turning. You infer the power that makes it happen. Similarly, we see life, consciousness, sentience in beings.
And we infer the underlying consciousness, the Atma, that illuminates them.
Yes, that's the basis of our ability to perceive, to feel, to know.
He also contrasts this with the common scientific view, right? That consciousness somehow emerges from matter.
He does. The Vedantic view is actually the reverse. That matter itself is a manifestation of consciousness.
Yes, sir.
Yes. The sequence proposed is consciousness, energy, matter. Consciousness is primary. So everything that exists is fundamentally consciousness appearing in different forms.
Like seeing a flower, its existence, our awareness of it, its beauty or value.
Yeah.
It's all rooted in that one reality.
Exactly. Those aspects, existence, sat, consciousness, chit, and inherent value or bliss, anandanda, are inseparable aspects of the one underlying reality, Brahman. Whatever is a manifestation of that.
Understanding this.
Yeah.
This is what leads to fulfillment.
Knowing that which is to be known, this ultimate reality, is said to lead to liberation, fulfillment, the end of sorrow, while ignorance of it is the cause of samsara, the cycle of suffering.
So the root cause of all our sorrow, according to Vedanta, is simply ignorance, not knowing our true nature.
That's the fundamental diagnosis, yes. Because if our true nature is limitlessness, completeness, happiness, then in reality there's no room for sorrow. Sorrow arises from mistakenly identifying with what we are not.
It's a very different approach than trying to fix the sorrow while accepting it as ultimately real.
It is. Vedanta aims to remove the very basis of sorrow by revealing its illusory nature, rooted in ignorance. And true success, from this perspective, isn't just wealth or fame, but that inner state of happiness and fulfillment.
To understand this identification, he introduces Prakriti and Purusha.
Yes. These are two fundamental principles. Prakriti is essentially matter, the non-self, everything that is inert, changeable, including our physical body and the mind complex.
Okay, the body-mind stuff.
Right. And Purusha is the spirit, the self, pure consciousness, the unchanging witness, the conscious principle within. Every individual is seen as a composite of these two.
And suffering comes from confusing them.
Exactly. Atma, the Purusha, pure consciousness, is inherently free from suffering, from samsara. Suffering arises when this consciousness mistakenly identifies with the limitations and changes of Prakriti, the body-mind.
Ah, like the actor identifying with a bigger role.
Precisely that analogy again. The actor's real nature is unchanged, perhaps wealthy and comfortable. But by deeply identifying with the role of the suffering beggar, they experience that suffering, even though it's based on a false identification.
So our suffering comes from identifying with the costume of the body and mind, instead of the actor, the true self.
That's the core idea. And this ties into karma as well.
How does karma fit into Prakriti and Purusha?
Well, Prakriti, the world of matter and change, operates according to cause and effect, which includes the law of karma. Our actions, karma, within this realm create tendencies and future results.
And karma helps explain why things are the way they are. The differences between people.
Yes. Swamiji explains that creation is seen as a manifestation from an unmanifest potential, always with a cause. Karma provides a framework for understanding the diversity of life, individual destinies, inclinations, things that might go beyond just genetics.
So it's not random.
Not according to this view. Life is seen as beginningless, Anarti. We don't just pop into existence. We cycle through embodiments based on our past karma.
Beginningless and endless, just changing form.
Essentially, yes, until liberation through self-knowledge. The key takeaway is that we are the creators of our own destiny through our karma. Our circumstances aren't arbitrary.
Even our parents are just instruments for our karma to unfold.
That's the perspective offered, yes.
Yeah.
They provide the necessary conditions based on our karmic trajectory.
Okay. And finally, Swamiji talks about this indwelling self, the Purusha, as a witness.
Yes, he uses the metaphor of the Purusha being like a king dwelling within the city of the body.
The city with its 11 gates.
Right, the 9 openings, eyes, ears, nostrils, mouth, etc., plus the navel and the crown representing the body's interaction with the world. But the king, the self, is independent of the city's activities and limitations.
The city might be busy or quiet, but the king remains the king.
Exactly. Even when the city seems to shut down in deep sleep, the self, the awareness, is still present, enabling the experience of having slept peacefully. This indwelling self is the ultimate limitless reality right here within us.
And its role is primarily as a witness, the Sakshi.
Yes, the Sakshi, the proximate illuminator, the conscious witness. Everything, thoughts, feelings, sensations, actions, takes place in the presence of this self, illuminated by it.
But the self itself isn't doing the actions or having the feelings.
Correct. It's the silent, non-participating presence, like the light that allows activities in a room but isn't involved in them. It's not the doer, karta, or the experiencer, bhakta, in the ultimate sense. That belongs to the mind identifying with the self.
That raises a common question, though. If the self is God, essentially present in everyone, why doesn't it stop bad things from happening? Like, stop a criminal.
Ah, yes. Swamiji addresses this. The explanation is that the self, as the impartial witness, permits all activities at the level of the mind. It doesn't interfere with the free will operating within Prakriti. It's like the sun shining equally on all activities, good or bad.
It provides the consciousness, but doesn't dictate the actions.
Exactly. The idea of God taking avatar to destroy evil is then interpreted more psychologically.
As the self manifesting within one's own mind.
Yes, as the awakening of discrimination and strength within oneself to overcome negative tendencies, to destroy the evil within one's own consciousness.
Wow. That brings us back nicely to the importance of cultivating those positive tendencies, those values.
It does. And Swamiji concludes by really emphasizing the depth of a value like ahimsa, nonviolence. When you understand its full implication, thought, word, and deed, rooted in seeing the same self everywhere, it becomes truly transformative.
Okay, so let's try and pull the main threads together from this deep dive. We started with that common feeling of lack.
And saw how it might be a misunderstanding of our true nature, which is already complete.
Right. Then we looked at the internal battle, the divine versus demonic tendencies within us, and how crucial cultivating values is.
Not just for some lofty spiritual goal, but for actual inner peace, the capacity to enjoy life, and for purifying the mind for self-knowledge.
We touched on the difference between natural values, aligned with ourself, and acquired values learned from society.
And the importance of things like humility, not demanding respect, and a really deep understanding of non-violence.
Plus, those healthy attitudes like dispassion, self-acceptance, moderation, and equanimity.
All leading towards recognizing the true self, that unchanging consciousness, the actor behind the costumes of life, which is limitless happiness itself.
And understanding that the root of suffering is ignorance of this. So the false identification with the body-mind complex, Prakriti.
Bringing in karma to explain our journey and seeing the self as the silent, indwelling witness, the Sakshi.
It really feels like understanding and, more importantly, living these principles offers a genuine path, a way to move beyond sorrow and realize, our true potential.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a profound framework. And that leads us to maybe a final thought for you, the learner, to ponder.
Okay, what's the provocation?
Just consider, how might identifying one specific area in your life where applying a deeper understanding of these values, maybe honesty, maybe nonviolence in speech, maybe self-acceptance, how could that create a significant shift?
A shift in your perspective or even just your daily behavior.
Exactly. Where could this understanding make a real difference for you? It's really an invitation for your own reflection, your own exploration of these powerful teachings.
Something to really chew on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the value of values.
It's been a great discussion.
Until our next exploration, keep seeking.